A recent stat said that 95% of nutrition content on TikTok, on Instagram is inaccurate. I feel like that's a big part of our work and taking up that space there to try to correct that message. I also feel like diets are quite exclusive. So a lot of people think about a healthy diet as something you go on once in a while and you come off. But really when we think about health, it's that diet that we can do in that long term. So I feel like thinking about it from what is sustainable, what we like to eat in the first place is a big part of working towards better nutrition and better life. I also understand that for a lot of people, when you're sitting there and there's delicious food in front of you, it's very hard to sort of reconcile that with your health over the next 10, 20, 30 years. You're not thinking about what this is doing to my long-term risk. And I think that's why food has to be delicious. Eating disorders, rising as well. And even if not for clinical eating disorders, we've got disordered eating. So it's a very fine line. And we definitely want to encourage, a positive relationship with food. I think when we focus too much on perfect, then we think that I just don't have time, it's not the right season. These little things matter. It doesn't have to be perfect. We just have to find what works and do our best.
Yeah.
And honestly, the best diet that we can maintain long term, that's going to make the biggest difference to our health as well.
Hi, I'm Amy, and this is What's on Your Plate by the Meat Club. Each week, we dive into real conversations about what we eat, why it matters, and how to build a better plate one bite at a time. If you enjoy the show, hit like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on Instagram at the Meat Club SG. Let's dive into the episode. Today, we have Annabelle Johnson, the anti-diet dietitian. Welcome, Annabelle.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And happy birthday to the Meat Club. 10 years.
Yes.
Big achievement.
Thank you so
good
much.
Job.
Thank you.
You're a little baby, I'm sure. One of three.
My third, yes. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a dietitian and a mom. I feel like anti-diet dietitian confuses a lot of people. It's a big part of my professional title to then go against. But often when I tell people I'm a dietitian, I get fear.
Okay.
People tell me you don't want to see what I eat, or, you're food police. People feel scared. But that's not what a lot of dietitians do. And I think we also live in a world where there's a lot of nutrition information, no shortage of it, but a lot of it's potentially quite inaccurate and quite polarizing as well. A recent stat said that 95% of nutrition content on TikTok, on Instagram is inaccurate. And I feel like, and I feel like that's, a big part of our work and taking up that space there to try to correct that message. I also feel like diets are quite exclusive. So a lot of people think about, a healthy diet as something you go on once in a while and you come off and, maybe it's, leading up to birthday month, leading up to summer. But really when we think about health, it's that diet that we can do in that long term. So I feel like thinking about it from what is sustainable, what we like to eat in the first place is a big part of working towards better nutrition and better life.
I love that philosophy so much.
Thank you.
I think as Australians, we completely embrace the lifestyle piece as well as the nutritional piece. And things should and do go hand in hand, right? And for you, I'm sure you would practice what you preach. How does, what you do on a day-to-day inform your lifestyle and approach to food?
I always tell people I love food.
Okay.
Food was because people think I don't. People think I'm a dietitian and they're like, oh, you probably will tell me to eat really boring food that's not delicious, that, is completely different from what I usually eat. But that's not true. I love food. My mom says it was my first word. Now as a mother myself, I'm realizing that a lot of her recollections seem wrong. do you know what I mean? They don't seem 100% accurate, but she tells me it's my first word.
Yeah.
My grandfather, who I never met, was a chef. And I think there is a relationship there to my love for food and my family. But I do love food. And I also understand that for a lot of people, when you're sitting there and there's delicious food in front of you, it's very hard to sort of reconcile that with your health over the next 10, 20, 30 years. You're not thinking about what this is doing to my long-term risk. And I think that's why food has to be delicious. You have to enjoy it. We eat, at least 3 times a day. It's a good source of joy. In our really busy lives, it's often how we show ourselves a little bit of love, a little bit of mindfulness. If you're a busy mom, it's, that one meal that you get that it's like a nice meal that you can sit down to eat can be really calming, really grounding. And I feel like food has all these powers. It's not just about, macros or protein. It's a lot more than that.
100%.
And we have to enjoy it. Otherwise, it's simply not sustainable.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Elimination is awful, and that's all. And restriction is even worse because you tend to over binge when you do that. And I know in my case that making sure that you're making an informed decisions in front of a family. So we recently met for the first time at a Mums and Bubs event, and you've got your own daughter as well.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Because a big part of your program is not just nutrition for adults, which we can dive into, but also Bubs.
Yeah.
You've got this 1,000 days of, how do you frame that? 1,000 days of
So we call
feeding?
we call it the 1,000 days. And essentially it's the time from preconception. So, in that trying to conceive period, looking at fertility, pregnancy, that immediate postpartum period, and for the child up to their second birthday. So that window of time is critical. It can set that foundation for their health over the really long term. So if you think about, bang for buck, during that whole, preconception, pregnancy time, we're really looking at mom's diet, but we're also affecting baby. So it's really valuable to look at nutrition over that time. But then when we're starting off, that first, 1 to 2 years, that nutrition matters as well. So it's a really valuable time. And we know with kids, you've got that baby who's going to sit in that high chair and eat a wide variety of things. And that in a blink of an eye, you have a toddler who's running around, who, refuses to sit down. All that changes so fast. And I think parents really need to be empowered to feed their babies the best way they can amongst all the nutrition noise we're getting.
Yeah.
But I also feel like there is a really fine line there of also creating this love for food. And I think as a dietitian, I really appreciate how tricky that is, because as parents, we want to feed them well, but we also don't want them to feel like, something is toxic or we're demonizing food.
Or bad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because for kids, it's a really confusing message. Like I have people telling me that their kid came home from school and they say things like, oh, someone said that, chocolate is poison and Henry's mom's poisoning him because Henry's mom gave him chocolate.
Oh, wow.
It's a very confusing message.
Yeah.
Or to tell kids that, chocolate cake should make them feel guilty, but we give it to them on their birthdays.
Yeah.
So as a parent, we want to do well, we want to feed them well, but we also want to, make sure that we know that they have a healthy relationship with food, because eating disorders, rising as well. And even if not for clinical eating disorders, we've got disordered eating. So it's a very fine line. And we definitely want to encourage, a positive relationship with food, especially amongst all the diet noise on social media.
There is so much to unpack in what you just said. I'm trying to decide what to
you've got little
tackle
girls.
first.
Well, you've got preteen girls as well. So that's probably massive for you as well.
On one side, you can say something, or your husband can say something, or a friend can say something that sets off a trigger. I had that. Yeah. And not to digress, but it was something someone said to me. I was training a lot. I stopped. I kept eating the same amount of food that I was when I was training 3 times a day, and I naturally put on more weight. And that one phrase triggered me into an eating disorder, which we won't go down for this particular session. But, you think about what adults can say, let alone what social media play. So I guess you're absolutely right when you frame it in terms of what role like social media has in this space. It must be so confusing and so misleading, and these one-tip tricks that just are not going to do anyone any justice, right? And
especially with filters and all this other stuff that's online, I think our kids really are subject to all this messaging. Like with that statistic about 95% being inaccurate, apparently most teenagers are now getting diet advice from the internet or from TikTok, and they might change their diet rules 3 times a week.
Wow.
And that's on information that really is from someone who's not a credentialed expert. So it is fairly worrying. It's something we have to think about. And I think that message goes alongside. Yes, we need to look at health. We don't want to be eating heaps of ultra-processed foods and fast foods. And we understand that. But then we also want to be really mindful of that relationship with food. And it's a really narrow line to walk, I think, and really tricky for most people.
For sure. And for me at least, the message I try and have is each meal, and you rightly point out, on average you're eating 3 times a day. Each meal is really an investment into your future, because if you are if you are loading excess salts and sugars and artificial ingredients into the food that you're eating, it's going to have an impact on your lifestyle when you're old and you want to enjoy potentially your retirement. Before we go into that, let's maybe just take a step back and looking at this 1,000-day program that you run. How would a woman that is looking to have children and conceive, how would nutrition play a role in her, in trying to fall pregnant?
Well, definitely something that we don't talk about a lot. And I think a lot of the advice around fertility sort of goes against what diet culture teaches us. I think first to realize that to conceive, to have healthy periods, to then get pregnant, does require an amount of energy. So if someone was just eating, salads all day and over-exercising, the body feels stressed. It doesn't feel like it's ready to, provide life to a whole other being. So sort of taking time back to, like scaling back a little bit, scaling back the exercise, make sure you're not over-exercising, eat well, eat nutritiously, and also manage stress so that your body knows that it's primed and ready to welcome life, because it is pregnancy is immensely stressful on the body. I feel like the other part of it as well, though, is preparing for it, because pregnancy can be rough. A lot of people go through pregnancy not having any sort of appetite, maybe struggling to keep food down. And that's stressful because moms know that, their nutrition matters. In that situation where you haven't eaten a vegetable in like a week, you worry about how, that could do to baby. But our bodies are really resilient. So when we've got good stores, when we go into pregnancy with a good nutritional store, we don't worry so much about, those early few weeks or potentially first half of pregnancy. We really have to focus on that. And in saying that as well, though, conception's wild. Like, you don't know when it happens. Nobody can pinpoint. Well, some people can, but it's hard to say when that happens. A lot of pregnancies are also accidental, happen quicker than people expect. Things like your folic acid or your folate for neural tube development, that happens in the first 3 to 4 weeks of falling pregnant. Most people don't realize they're pregnant until they miss their period or maybe a little bit later on. So that's why that, starting that prenatal nutrition bit should really start quite a bit before and not after you've realized you're pregnant. There is that window before that we should hopefully be optimizing. Then the other question is, well, what if I don't want to get pregnant in that immediate, future? I feel like, healthy, happy hormones are what we want as well. Happy, healthy periods, fertility. It sort of covers all facets of health. It's not that niche that you only think about it in that preceding few months. It's something that really all women should be thinking about. So
Definitely.
I think it fits in quite well together.
You mentioned nutritional storage, which I loved. What exactly does that mean?
So
for a layperson.
So with our vitamins, we don't just sort of eat what we, eat today and then use that within the same day. Yeah. Different vitamins have different sort of half-lives or storage times in our body. Some vitamins stay in our body a little bit longer, some stay a little bit shorter. But we do know that if you've got good stores, so, your body's got some of that vitamins already sitting there. If you're not getting it in a shorter period of time, let's say the first 3 months of pregnancy, your body's not going to be immediately deficient. Yeah. You've got stores to run low. And to be honest, the body's really resilient. Most of pregnancy is usually running you to the ground. You're usually using up a lot of your reserves, which is why in that postpartum as well, we focus on rebuilding all of that. Because our bodies are smart, our babies are really smart. Even if you really struggle to eat enough in pregnancy, your baby's gonna be okay, but your own stores, your risk of osteoporosis probably goes up. So that's why we have to take care of moms after the baby's out as well.
Yeah, I love the idea of confinement. I didn't get to enjoy that myself, but the idea of just slowing down, staying still and rebuilding yourself day by day, for me, seems like something we should all be benefiting from. But in terms of nutrition, so we've got the nutrition stores, our bodies are intuitive. Is there a particular approach, and I don't want to use the name diet, so is there a particular approach to food that you take? Is it, just going after whole foods? And what would that look like?
So I call myself a whole foods, I call my approach a whole foods approach because, again, I feel like we need to look at foods. Foods are wonderful. Often people want to come to me and look straight at vitamins, But the thing is, when we eat
foods... As in supplements?
Yeah, like supplements. Yeah. When we eat foods, we eat all the different ones. So we think about, iron, for instance. When we eat meat, it's got iron, it's got zinc, it's got protein. It's all perfectly packaged in there. When we have just an iron supplement alone, we are missing some of the other ones that we need alongside. What can happen is when we have too much of one particular vitamin, so if someone's having a lot of iron, for instance, and none of the others, it can sort of overcrowd the others. So our body's taking a lot of iron, and that can down the line cause things like a copper or a zinc deficiency. Yeah, right. So that's the tricky thing about vitamins, where too much isn't necessarily a good thing because it crowds out all the other ones as well. But generally, excess isn't a problem from foods because it's hard to eat that amount of foods. Similar to liver in pregnancy, for instance, vitamin A is a problem when people take supplements. But if you're eating liver or pate, no one's really eating massive steaks of liver. It's not really how you eat liver. So that's not really so much of a problem as opposed to supplements, for instance. So in saying that, I take a whole foods approach, but, requirements are high in pregnancy. People tend to not be eating so well. Things like nausea happen. So the prenatals are there, but they're more a backup rather than, that front driver of nutrition. So whole foods are really important. In that season of life, the few things I like to look at are eggs. Eggs are fantastic. They've got choline, they've got protein. They're a really quick source of nutrition. Some people in early pregnancy have complete aversion to like a lot of protein foods. So eggs are one you can make pancakes, you can make muffins with. They're really versatile. So I love eggs. Also really affordable, easy to use. Meat is one that is good in pregnancy. I'm not just saying because of the meat club. It's good in pregnancy because of the iron as well. We know that iron needs are really high. So many people that have gone through pregnancy would have felt, things like iron deficiency. It's not fun to be iron deficient. So eating enough meat can be good. And it's funny, sometimes with cravings, you find that your cravings, did you have a meat craving in pregnancy?
That was the reason why the business was started.
So I do find that your bodies are quite smart. Your bodies tend to ask for things that you need. And you might find that milk is the other one that I get as well. So calcium is another requirement. People say, I never used to drink milk. And I was drinking like glasses of milk during pregnancy. So calcium's another important one. Salmon, so the omega-3s. I think, again, we get distracted with the supplement conversation, right? Should I be taking fish oils? Should I be doing all the other stuff? Should I be having some sort of milk powder that's got omega-3 in it? But they are food sources as well.
Well, I mean, food all has the micronutrients that should sustain life.
And we absorb it so much more as well.
And we forget that. And I guess that's part of all the marketing and confusion. I have these conversations all the time about having, a meat alternative versus just some vegetables. If you don't feel like a steak, that's fine. So maybe have some just a bowl of roasted veggies and see how that feels. Which actually makes me think about babies and feeding. Obviously, there's formula and breastfed milk. But then when it comes to weaning a child, what's your approach there? I read somewhere where you're a little bit more, you get the baby more involved.
So again, I feel like with everything, it's so polarized. I feel like you can't go into any conversation now without having two massive sides. And parenting's a whole new ball game when it comes to that. I always say that whole baby-led weaning where you see a baby holding a drumstick versus purees, it doesn't have to be a this versus that. You can serve a baby purees alongside, finger food, which is what we call, things like a chicken drumstick or a soft steamed piece of broccoli. And even adults do it. You might have pumpkin soup with some bread. And that's a puree and that's a solid. So you can do a little bit of both. So my approach takes into account both. The evidence really says that you can start with either. We recommend starting kids about 6 months. You can do finger food, you can do purees. But ideally, by about 9 months, we want to start kids on some sort of finger foods because that's this window where they're more receptive to new flavors and textures. In saying that, we wean kids at 6 months because that's when their iron stores start to get lower. So babies are born with iron from mom, and that sticks around for about 6 months. It's not like a switch goes off at 6 months, but the levels start to drop. So that's why traditionally a lot of, first foods are things like iron fortified cereals, but we get iron from food as well. So if you want to skip the iron fortified cereals, then things like, a chicken thigh or a chicken drumstick, red meat, pate, these are really good first foods for babies as well because they contain the iron. And iron deficiency is the most common deficiency in children in developed countries. So definitely something to think about as well.
I wish I had you 10 years ago when I was with my first daughter and navigating this, I guess, this confusing space where I know for a first-time mum in a different country without the support of immediate family, I kind of lost my intuition, so to speak. And I find that surprising because I come from a family which have always had whole foods in their life. My grandparents were Dutch on one side. My mum and my dad are very much, driven by health and they move every day and they've educated us on the benefits of eating whole ingredients. But for one reason or another, I just got trapped by all this, just nutrition noise. And I remember distinctly for at least a month when I was transitioning Harriet from milk to solids, just getting very overwhelmed with everything and referring back to textbooks and forgetting my intuition. So much so one time, and I'd been having peanut butter throughout my pregnancy, throughout breastfeeding, so I knew she was getting it through me. But I remember actually giving it to her for the first time and having on speed dial on my phone, the emergency number to the hospital, because I was so petrified that she was going to going to have an anaphylactic fit.
But see, when you're a mom, I feel like it's so different though. Like this desire to protect your baby is so heightened that you sort of do weird and wonderful things sometimes in that state of like mama bear protection mode.
Totally.
So
even with a chicken drumstick, which I know I did with her as well, but then just being so scared about the bone fragments and, the risk of choking. What, is there anything that we can do to kind of alleviate mums? I don't like using the word anxiety, but heightened sense of, just care and attention to feeling like they should go back to their intuitive self.
So I feel like, I do run like a weaning workshop where we cover, what to serve, when to serve, how to serve foods. And to be completely honest, it wasn't a space I wanted to go into. So when I'm a dietitian, I work with pediatrics. When, a few people came to me going, are you going to start something like this? I thought there was plenty of information out there. But when I became a mom myself and was plugged into the space, I realized how varied the information was.
Yeah.
From what to serve, how to serve, and even allergens. Like, do you start the allergens early? Do you have to introduce foods one at a time? And like you said, there's a lot of anxiety around it. But even looking at the evidence, we know that when parents are empowered, when they've done the training, they feel a lot more secure to set these boundaries around food.
Yeah.
And I think it's not so much even the choking risk, which is a big part of it, right? I think parents need to know how to safely prepare food, and parents should be, trained in first aid, because things happen. Kids don't just choke on food. They also like to chew on pen caps and, latex balloons, which are all dangerous. And I think every caregiver should be, aware of what to do in those situations.
Yeah.
But at the same time, parents should be empowered to set those boundaries. And I think often the problem is with this empowerment piece, a lot of the discussions are about very specific things in life, right? Very specific aspects of parenting. But I often ask parents, like, what's your philosophy around food? Because I think that affects, all the other things. And as a dietitian, I can't prepare parents for every single question they're going to be asked. But what's your overall approach to food for yourself? And do you think that's something you can apply to your child? Yeah. And if it's not, then is there anything you can change? Because kids pretty much eat what we do. They're like massive copycats. They do exactly, they don't listen to us, but they do what we do. True. And the best way to get a toddler to eat a snack is for you to sit there, eat a snack and not share it with them. Yeah. 100% they want exactly what you're eating. Yeah. So I do feel like, family nutrition, children nutrition, all ties in quite tightly together. And it's, again, bang for a buck. You're targeting everyone in the family and also the kids.
Yeah. Do you as a family make a habit of, you mentioned your mum is also here in Singapore, which is fantastic. Do you try and have a lot of like meals around the dining table together?
Pretty much. Guaranteed every night. Yeah. And to be honest, today was the first day my husband and I had breakfast without my little one. She's like 1.5, and we've had breakfast with her every single day since she was born. Okay. My mum brought her out today, so that was the first, and it felt weird. We were like, is this life without her? It didn't seem it's very quiet. Yeah. But we eat dinner together every night. We eat most meals together. It's a massive privilege. I know time-wise it doesn't work. A lot of parents are busy. But there's also evidence about that. We know that families where they have at least 3 meals a week with their kids, and 3 meals isn't prohibitive for a lot of people. I know during the week it can be tricky, but this 3 meals can be over the weekend. It can all be over the weekend. It can be a breakfast. It can be a lunch. It can be a snack. But sitting down with kids at least 3 times is protective over the long term, up to kids who are 18 against risky behaviors, health behaviors. And I think it's simply the fact that it's a time for people to come together. Yep. Kids sometimes don't want to tell you things when you ask them outright. Like, how was your day at school? You don't get a lot back. Yeah. But if everyone's distracted and eating, things start to come up. Yeah. And I think it's that moment of connection. It's that leveling ground where everyone's sitting at the same level. Everyone's paused for the day. Hopefully no devices there. And they've got the time to chat. So I think that family meal, is really important. It's something we get control over as well as parents, what we put on the table. And I find it frankly quite sacred as well. So the big part of our family life is the family meal.
Yeah, I'm happy to say that we do that as well. And I feel so grateful that I get the opportunity to do it because, again, it's not like everyone does. But there is a lot to say about sitting around a dining table and sharing a meal, talking, and very often, I will get questions about, what is this, Mum? Yeah. What are you feeding me? Yeah. And my analogy is always, the book Green Eggs and Ham.
Yeah.
Don't judge a meal by the look and color. Like, it might not look nice, but fair enough. Like, even close your eyes if you have to. And look, I'm not saying this sound that like I'm, serving a stew of green mush. Like, this is something that I would like to think is presentable and delicious. But half the time it's like, oh yeah, no, that is really nice. Yeah. That is delicious. Thank you.
I feel like often them saying they don't like it doesn't mean they don't like it. They just want to have an opinion, and it's easier to push your buttons than to not push your buttons. I think that's a large part of it as well.
Yeah, that's true. We were talking before about baby-led weaning, and I have to say one thing that I don't miss is the mess then that can create.
Yeah.
You've got a chicken drumstick on the floor or a piece of steak on the wall, let alone all the colourful fruit and vegetables. What do you say to a parent that is battling with a kid that, is going to town on their meal?
So a few things here. I think one, mess is part of it. So, unfortunately, I feel like once you're a parent in all aspects of life, everything's just messier. So it is part of it.
Yeah.
Number two is don't get them too much at the same time.
Okay.
Because sometimes when there's too much food on the plate, it's just a bigger mess.
Oh.
You can always top them up if you need. If they finish something, you can top it up. But giving them lots and lots of things like yogurt to play with, can be a sign that that's going to be a messy meal.
Okay.
Also having that boundary of, are you done now, or are you just playing, or are you still eating?
Yeah.
So my little one today, she was obviously done. She started throwing food around, and she generally doesn't do it, but I think it was a sign that she was done. And in her way, she was telling us. So as a parent, it's also fine to go like, look, you've had your time to eat your meal, and now you're done, and now you can come to the high chair.
Yeah.
My other piece, which again, it's not for everyone, is it's okay for you to pick the food off the floor and give it back to them again.
Yeah.
When we first started Solids, the very first time she did that, my husband picked it up, and I was like, are we giving, when you're saying that boundary with your partner, like, are we giving that back to her? My husband was like, you let her chew like toys that have been on the floor. How is this any different?
That's true.
And I was like, I had no response to that. So, that's what we do. If she's dropped a piece of steak on the floor, and to be completely honest, if it's a nice piece of steak, we'll eat it if she doesn't want to eat it. So the waste doesn't happen. Sometimes my husband and I have to fight for the last piece of meat, and there's very little waste. But yeah, if it's on the floor, to be honest, it's fine for them. Granted, if the floor is fairly clean, reasonably clean.
Yeah, good for the gut microbiome.
I was going to say, and sometimes focusing too much on hygiene is not great for the gut microbiome or our microbiome in general. So, letting go a little bit and leaning into a little bit more mess than we're used to can be actually a good thing as well.
That could be a whole topic in itself, but I wanted to just touch on your training. So you studied in Australia, is that right?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So at that point, when I wanted to become a dietitian, there wasn't any locally available courses.
Really?
Yeah.
I find that surprising.
Yeah, so nothing local in Singapore. The Ministry of Health was giving out scholarships to get trained overseas, and Australia was on their list of sort of like allowed universities.
What year are we talking? So if you don't mind me asking.
Oh, of course. 2014 was when I started university, but I started my application process probably about 2012, 2013.
No,
so there was a little bit of a gap.
I actually had no idea.
Yeah.
So no training, nutrition?
Dietetics specifically. So there's a little bit of a difference between nutrition and dietetics.
What is that?
Nutritionists tend to be a bit more general. So they work generally more population level, public health level, less on that one-on-one basis. Whereas if you were sick, if you had something like diabetes or cancer, then you might see a dietitian that's more clinical. Dietitians tend to work more in hospitals, but they can do all the other stuff as well. But it's a little bit more clinical. It requires spending time in hospitals, working in hospitals as part of your internship. And that's what I did in Australia.
Okay. So just drawing a timeline then, dietitian as oh my gosh, I'm like losing my words. As a profession was not something that was available 10 odd years ago in Singapore.
We've always had dietitians, but they were all overseas trained.
Foreign trained.
Yeah. So either in the UK or Australia.
Could you do it now in Singapore if you wanted? Okay, cool.
So I think we just graduated our first batch maybe like 2 or 3 years ago now.
Right. So still very recent.
Yeah.
And do you think that's kind of timed with the recent, I guess, interest and learning curve that I feel, as an observer, I feel like the interest and learning that is going on among, Singapore, not just local specific, I'm talking about everyone going on this health kind of journey. And it's almost like a hockey stick where we're just at the bottom, and I feel like, and I'm excited by the idea of it coming to the forefront of everyone's minds that, like we said at the start, an investment in good food now pays dividends to when you're older.
But see, I feel both ways about it. I also wonder whether it's a lot of social media driven stuff.
Okay.
And I think also, a lot of funding behind things like supplements. So I find, and I think it depends on what world you're plugged into.
Okay.
Hopefully you're plugged into a slightly more positive world than I am. But the world that I am plugged into tends to be, every single week there's this new, food or powder or specific nutrient or diet that, people should be on. And I feel like that interest in that quick fix is also growing.
Yeah.
So I think in a lot of ways.
There's no such thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the blue or the red tablet. That doesn't exist.
But I think people want to hear that it does because, that classic message of eat some carrots, eat some vegetables, have a fairly balanced diet, move your body, sleep enough. That doesn't, the algorithm doesn't love that. That doesn't get like 5.8 million views.
Yeah.
People want to see something quick and interesting. And I feel like nutrition messaging sometimes can be a little bit tricky in that sense.
So when someone comes into the clinic or you consult with them for the first time, do you feel like a lot of the time you are dealing with a huge education piece?
It's tricky, right? So I think I started my career in the public hospital. So there it was a lot more, education. People weren't on social media as much. A lot of my clientele was a lot older.
Okay.
But now in the space that I work in private practice, a lot of my clients come in and I find a lot of my job is to demystify and debunk a lot of myths that are already there. People come in, frankly, very confused.
Yeah.
Because, you hear that spinach is bad and you're like, I thought spinach was good. And, can I reheat it? What about the arsenic and rice? People are concerned about all these. Now I'm giving you new things to be concerned about.
I'm going to be on my phone tonight and it'll be ads.
Just to put it out there, spinach is fine. Rice is fine. We're all good. But people come in with a lot of, these concerns.
Yeah.
And you know what? Stress is also really bad for our diets, or for our health. So when we're really stressed about our diets, that doesn't really help us in any shape or form.
And so what's your messaging to them in that case? So I'm coming to you for the first time. I'm one of these classic, stress-driven eaters that is looking for a quick fix. What do you say or do to kind of help them overcome that?
So I feel like people kind of come to me because they know I like to present the evidence base. I'm not the kind of person that will tell you this is what I think and you should just go with that.
Yeah.
I'm happy to explain, the different studies or what the current science is like, and you can make your own decision around what you think. Because often there's no black and white, answer to things. It's what works best for you. What works best for you might not work for someone else. And even through different seasons of life, different things might work better as well. But we also try to pinpoint, whatever their goals are, whether it's energy levels or managing a certain illness, what we can correct, the really easy things we can do that's not going to cause more stress. And if they're anxious about a certain thing, then hopefully we can alleviate that. And to be honest, it's the little individual parts of your diet, it's not really likely to be consequential. It's what you're maintaining consistently over that really long term that's going to make the biggest difference.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So in the last, little while, we've had, dietitians come out of Singapore. Do you feel like the training in Australia and the training in Singapore are more or less commensurate?
A little bit different.
Okay.
I think that's cultural as well.
Yeah, true.
I feel like, in Australia, I had a lot of fun at university.
Okay.
Maybe it was slightly less intense, which gave us a little bit more pockets of time to, I went ahead and got my personal training credentials, which I think complements really well. And I think in Singapore, it's a little bit more academically vigorous.
But do you do
I don't do personal training right now,
yeah.
but I think it was just good to have. I think it's, with wellness, right? With moving your body, with food, it kind of comes together. So I think it's good to have that broad knowledge base, even if I'm not using it directly. So I think it's slightly different. I will say though that being in Australia was so fun. Even from a cultural immersion point of view, Australia's got produce that is amazing. I mean, it's a wonderfully agriculturally driven country. I remember we had this talk from the Department of Agriculture, and my mind was blown. There's so many little aspects of things that are fascinating. Coming from a Singaporean perspective, I've never had to think about, bacteria or, the kind of land and water, balloting for water from different farms.
Biodiversity.
Yeah, it is fascinating. And I remember going home and telling my boyfriend, now husband, why didn't I think about working for agriculture? Why didn't I do a degree in agriculture? And his very clever response was, well, it doesn't exist in Singapore, and that's why. So I think it did give me a very well-rounded view of a different health system as well.
Yeah.
What works there, because nothing's perfect.
Yeah.
But I think that exposure was really valuable. And I met my husband, so win-win.
Win-win.
Yeah.
Speaking of health systems, I think that's another point that Australia does very well is, we're always looking to treat the cause. not the symptom. And by that, I mean, when we are looking at illnesses of any kind, obviously a Panadol and antibiotics always serve a purpose. But at what point do we need to actually look at what we're doing to our bodies and not addressing, those fundamental issues? I think Australia having, just been on a wellness trend for a number of years now, are very well versed in that. Do you see a lot of people, I guess it comes back to that quick fix, please help me treat the symptom of being overweight or having a foggy brain or being fatigued. Do you often go back and just try and I guess put them on a path of understanding that this is a long-term journey?
I feel like the difference you mentioned between Australia and Singapore also stem with a different pace of life. I feel very empathetic to, a lot of my Singaporean clients specifically who work a lot. Like some of my clients can be in like 10 countries in 1 month.
Yeah, wow.
Like that's a lot. It's a lot for your body. It's a lot for your mind. And I find it admirable that my client, clients like that, they have so much on their plate, but it's something they're still thinking of because it's a lot. And it'll be easy to say, like, it's just not possible. I'm not even going to try.
Yeah.
But to try in that situation is wonderful. And I think that our pace of life is quite intense. Again, often with health, I think that the things we need to look at are often quite basic, but that time to just take a step back and have a little bit of insight, most people don't have time for that.
Yeah.
Most people are not sleeping enough.
Yeah.
And I understand that desire for a quick fix. But like I always explain to people, like a little supplement can maybe make like a 1 or 2% difference. But that other 98% needs to be a strong foundation of diet, exercise and sleep. And if you're not sleeping enough, no amount of supplements, if you're sleeping 2 hours a night, there's no cocktail of supplements that could help you because your body needs sleep, unfortunately, and it does.
So what are some of the plans that you would put, say, for example, if we take 2 case studies, the busy mum with a toddler and she's trying to feed not just herself, but, a toddler that is weaning, but as well as like an executive, and we can break these apart, we won't put them in two, but the type of executive that is, traveling around the world, as you say, how do you approach like some of the, hacks to kind of deal with their current lifestyles and knowing that it doesn't, I guess, last forever, or at least hopefully?
So I work a lot with mums, and often mums are very motivated to help their kids, but they might not be eating much. So it's quite often I get moms come in and, they want like a big plan for their kids. And when I ask them what they're eating, they're literally having like toast crusts or nothing or leftover fruit or yogurt.
So from the toddler, you mean?
Exactly,
oh, wow.
Exactly. So, and I always have to tell moms that, how you eat affects what they eat as well. Like they see you eating and they want to eat what you're eating.
Yeah.
So I feel like a big motivator for moms, at least, is to remind them that their health is a big predictor of their kids' health. That they can be eating the same food as their kids. And it's sort of, no one's got time to prepare 2 separate meals.
Yeah.
So doing one meal and, a family meal that works is important. Moms are busy, so just regular, proper meals, hopefully where you can sit down and chew because it's hard. Like, I preach eating mindfully, but I've got a 1.5-year-old. It's often hard. I don't know if I've got 10 minutes or 5 minutes to eat a meal before she decides that she's done and wash her hands. So it is hard. So that's for the mom. It's, I guess using that motivation of improving your kids' diet and therefore your family's diet, finding family solutions that work so you don't have to cook 2 meals, and really simple ones to just make sure you're eating enough because a lot of moms don't eat enough. Some moms forget to eat all day until it's dinner time and then they're hungry and they're hangry. And, I feel like as a mom, your mood affects everyone else as well.
100%. Oh, I mean, I know that in those circumstances, I need to have like a quick bite of something before I lose my cool, but it's entirely driven by, how exhausted I am. And then what would you say for the busy executives?
Again, I think it's about finding solutions that work. So even if my clients, I even look up sometimes where they work and what are the easy options around them. Well, we're lucky that in Singapore, especially in the CBD, plenty of good options out there. And clients can, reach out for these easy options. In terms of traveling, then we go back to some nutritional basics, because things like eggs, things like yogurt, things like fruit and veg, they're available in most countries. Granted, it's a bit harder in some areas and some airports, but across the board, it's a little bit easier. So we try to, put that in where we can. The other thing I do as well is try to layer in nutrition that works for them. So if someone works on client sites all day, then they might not have control over, their food between a certain time, but they might get, a good breakfast and maybe a good dinner. Then we try to work on those ones that they have control of. Because again, I think when we focus too much on like perfect, then we think that I just don't have time, it's not the right season. But these little things matter. It doesn't have to be perfect. We just have to find what works and do our best.
Yeah.
And honestly, the best diet that we can maintain long term, that's going to make the biggest difference to our health as well.
Yeah. We've referenced eggs twice now. Yeah. And I saw you were talking about eggs in the context of chicken and farming, and you made like a very helpful, I thought, summary on the difference just even between cage-free and free-range chicken and eggs. Can you just help the listeners understand what that difference is?
It's so tricky. And I feel like in Singapore, there's so many other types of eggs as well, like, firstborn eggs and all that kind of other stuff. And you might be actually more an expert at this than I am. Cage-free essentially means they're not in a cage. So they could still be in a barn. They could be let out for small amounts of time. Generally not. Generally, they're still in a barn, but essentially means they're not in a tight, confined, little cage.
Yeah.
Free range means that they get some outdoors time, hopefully some time in the sun. In saying that, it even depends on which farm you're looking at.
Yeah.
Some farms say free range, but the chickens maybe spend half the time in the barn and half the day outside, and how much time and space they get outside also differs. Because I think in our heads, often we think free range and we think about this lovely, open pasture where these chickens are happy and healthy and get to roam all day, but it's not quite the case. So it's tricky. I get people to think about, what their values are, what they align with, what they can afford, because pricing is different as well. The good news is nutritionally, there is a slight difference between, like free range and cage free and regular caged eggs, but it's not as significant as we think.
Okay.
So like most things diet, with most things produce, buy the best quality that you can afford that aligns with your values. Yeah. And I guess with chickens, we're thinking about the ethics of it as well.
Yeah, definitely. And then do you do the same kind of analogy between a grass-fed beef or like if you're talking to a client about, purchasing meat in general, obviously there's a big difference between like a Wagyu steak and a grass-fed steak. Do you have to navigate that with them as well?
I feel like part of that is first, like, affordability, availability. In terms of nutrition, not significant. Of course, with the Wagyu, there's the fat percentage and things like that. But again, none of that's really consequential in its food itself. It's more what the overall diet looks like. So someone really enjoys, Wagyu steak over, a regular steak, go for it, because food is meant to be enjoyed. In terms of nutrition, we do know that grass-fed tends to be, higher in some of the other vitamins as well, because, when cows eat grass, that grass has different vitamins, the grass is exposed to sun, then that goes onto the meat. So it's slightly more nutritious, but we also get nutrients from different aspects of the diet. The other thing, we get asked about a lot is things like sustainability. So is one necessarily better than the other? It depends. It's very hard to say. Like, we don't have a universal leveler or like, a grading for sustainability about whether one's better than the other. People talk about locally produced, but if it's locally produced in a not so sustainable way, if we had strawberries in Singapore that required lots of, air conditioning to get them to the right temperature, that wouldn't be as sustainable as well.
Totally.
So generally, we say buy the best quality you can afford. Find a supplier that you trust. So, if you can find someone that you like, it does require a little bit of research, but if you can find, a supplier that you trust, someone like the Meat Club, for instance, where, that they've gone through that extra effort of working with producers. Country of origin, I guess in Singapore, we import a lot of food as well. So thinking a little bit about country of origin, which food supply chains you trust a little bit more, a few things to think about there. But again, I think we have to do our best and not stress too much about it, because once you go down that rabbit hole of, it's really hard, because then, the farms are saying this, but do you trust them? So again, I feel like do a little bit of research, not too much that it overwhelms you. If you can find someone you trust, go with that. The good news is once you find someone that works for you, then you can just continue down that, path of buying from them as you please.
Yeah. I will add, and something that I found fascinating when I visited the suppliers that we've gone to, particularly on the beef side, is that not all grass-fed beef will taste the same because they will differ from seasonality. Yep. One might have been exposed to a drought and had to be supplemented with dried grass, being hay, versus, one that has been an abundance of lush green pasture. And they can taste remarkably different and then therefore have different micronutrients.
I've had friends that sort of like grow up with cows, and they tell me they can actually taste the difference between like that. They know the different cows and the difference between the different cows as well. Yeah.
And now I know you competed in a triathlon not long after having your daughter. Congratulations. But more recently, you've signed up to do the High Rocks, which is in how many?
I think it's like 2 weeks. It's like less than 2 weeks now. Yeah.
What's like your training and diet been like for our listeners? Have you changed anything? Have you kept it all the same? You're doing singles.
Yeah.
So that's by yourself in your age category.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about it.
I feel like sometimes it kind of comes second nature to me, but then also, being on social media, seeing people's journeys, I realize how fortunate I am to be a dietitian and be working in this space. High rock training is intense.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of running.
Yeah.
You're on your feet a lot. One thing I think a lot of female athletes don't think about is iron. Again, we keep talking about iron, but female athletes are really prone to iron deficiency or anemia. So being on top of how much iron you need is really important.
Yeah.
I feel like we think about that gym bro, lunchbox where it's got broccoli, it's got chicken breasts, and it's got, I don't know, sweet potato. But chicken breast is pretty much devoid of iron.
Wow.
So if you're a female athlete, especially if you're running a lot and doing a lot of endurance, then you need that iron.
Yeah.
So I would be thinking about iron.
Yeah.
The other thing I think about is, variety. So all the different colors, because, intense exercise is stressful to the body. I mean, it's good stress, but it's still some sort of stress. So the antioxidants from a wide variety of fruit and veg is really good.
Yeah.
Things like the omega-3s, so things like salmon, having some of the antioxidants from there can be really protective. It also helps you recover a lot better. I see a lot of athletes where they don't fuel well enough in that recovery. And I think you see it when you start that training, you might initially feel quite good. And it gets to this point where you go for your training days and you don't feel strong. You feel like you haven't recovered from the last training. Your body constantly feels like, you wake up and it feels like it's, breaking. And I think that recovery, fueling for training, eating a little bit before, what do you eat before, it's like carbohydrates and things like that. It's kind of like a lot of different moving parts because you're eating to fuel your training and eating to recover as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think my biggest message, especially for female athletes, is don't forget the iron and don't forget the variety. Your gut microbiome, that's supporting your immunity, supporting your overall health. You need that variety. You need some fermented foods, things like yogurt, sauerkraut, all that's great as well.
Yeah. Speaking of iron and micronutrients, if you were to pick 3 items off the Meat Club website for your next delivery, what would they be?
Not gonna lie, so the first one's gonna be a tomahawk steak. I love it. I love it. I like had I've got like a sous vide thing, and I think that makes it like, because it has to be cooked, like meat has to be cooked well, and I think that's just like delicious.
Yeah.
It is a treat.
I've never sous vide steak in my life, let alone a tomahawk. So do you obviously put even the bone in?
Yeah. So I have like the oven version of it. So I basically plug the temp. It makes it completely like, I don't have to use my brain. I don't have to use any technical skills. You basically put a probe in, set it to the right internal temperature, and it like does all that. And then you just sear it, and it's perfectly done.
Okay.
And that perfectly done where it's not raw, but it's still perfectly pink, and it's just the best. And and I save the bone for broth as well. So that giant bone, great for broth.
Amazing.
Chuck it in the freezer. When I've got a couple of bones, make some broth.
So you can cook it, freeze it, and then put it into your own soup.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I do that for everything. So, the big bones on the tomahawk steaks.
Yep.
If I, make a chicken and I've got like the carcass from a roast chicken.
Yep.
Or if I'm like spatchcocking the chicken, that little spinal section, the carcass, all that gets chucked in a big bag in my freezer. And when I've got a couple, just boil it for like 2-3 hours and you've got really good bone broth.
Wow.
So it also reduces food waste.
Yeah.
So that's item number 1.
Yep.
Mince.
Yeah.
I love a good burger.
Yeah.
Love it.
Are we talking about beef mince?
Yeah.
Okay.
I love a good like proper, burger.
Yeah.
My husband, he's Australian. He likes it with like pineapple and beetroot. Not gonna ache your yum. I mean, go for it. I eat it, but just a good cheeseburger, maybe some pickles.
Yeah.
So mince, and also really versatile. Bolognese, like really good family meals. Like kids all seem to like. And I think that's the other thing as well. Like a burger doesn't have to be.
Oh my gosh.
Like a food that we have to avoid. We can literally eat burgers like most meals, most weeks.
It's just been demonized through other, fast food brands. Yeah.
Because there's a perfectly balanced way to have burgers. Yeah. And I love myself a burger. And number 3, king salmon.
Oh, yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
We know that oily fish, it's great for kids. It's great for adults. For kids, great for brain development. For adults, it's good for heart health. So we eat oily fish maybe twice a week.
Yeah.
And a good cut of king salmon. It really is the best. And even when you cook it, you see the little like little bubbles of, that brilliant orange fat. And you know that's the good fat that you want in your body.
Yeah.
So that if I can add one extra cheeky one, if it's on your dime, then I'll grab a Chief Collagen bar as well.
Oh, amazing.
Because they're really good. And again, like if you're busy running around or on a plane, it's just a good source of, it's a good bar. It's fairly balanced.
Very clean.
It doesn't have all these weird, like I don't like the taste of sweeteners. And this one doesn't have
or ingredients that you can't pronounce.
Yeah.
I call them a pack flipper, so you turn it over and you read what's on the back.
Yeah.
And if I can't pronounce it, it's, it's generally a no-go.
So they're delicious. I like that. So that's my 4 if I can have 4.
Oh, definitely. You're allowed. You're permitted. And so where can our listeners find you?
So I've got a website. I am a dietitian. I do one-to-one consults. If you want to find me there, then that's dietitian.sg. Otherwise, I'm also on Instagram. I post nearly daily. So if you want to catch me on there, then that's Annabelle Dietitian on Instagram.
Amazing. Thank you so much for tuning in to What's on Your Plate. If you enjoyed today's episode, give us a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to our YouTube for more content like this. And if you're ready to fill your plate with clean, quality produce, please check out themeatclub.com.sg. We deliver straight to your door so you can eat well every day. See you on the next episode.